My presentation is going to be about what are the neurological, psychological and physiological consequences of methamphetamine. So it basically explains the long-term consequences of using methamphetamine and how it affects the nervous system and the brain. So the first part, what is methamphetamine? Methamphetamine is a form of amphetamine best known in its illegal form as what you'd commonly know as speed, ice, crystal meth, glass or chalk, and it's usually smoked, snorted, ingested or injected. It was first created for World War II, where it was used to battle fatigue with the soldiers. As a result of creating this drug, the epidemic started and there was about 5% cases of abusing methamphetamine. It originally was sold in pharmacies and supermarkets, but because of the abuse rate, it was eventually removed, and then of course it was taken up by illegal gangs such as the mafia, bikie gangs, typical underground crime gangs, and it was made in makeshift labs, underground labs, which are usually known to be dirty and disgusting, and they can use various chemicals such as toilet cleaner, laundry cleaner, and yeah, still being made today in these makeshift labs. Why do people use methamphetamine? Methamphetamine is a common party drug amongst 18 to 25-year-olds and is popular in nightclubs, in typical going out atmospheres. It produces a high, a state of awareness, euphoria, increased energy. So technically you can party all night on methamphetamine, an increased sex drive and pleasure, and gives a high rush. It's more cheaper than cocaine, and the effects of it can last 6 to 10 hours, but however the crash is pretty low compared to cocaine, which the high only lasts for 90 minutes. Methamphetamine can be made from over-the-counter pharmacy drugs such as pseudoephedrine and other cold and flu tablets. So how does methamphetamine travel through the body? When ingested, injected or snorted, methamphetamine quickly makes its way through the bloodstream and then is transported to various organs in the system and the brain. It can easily enter through the blood-brain barrier due to having small neutral molecules. It is here it starts the psychoactive effects. It passes through the central nervous system, and once it is here, it binds to dopamine, norepinephrine, and to a lesser extent serotonin transporters located on neuronal cell membranes. At higher concentrations, methamphetamine may also cross the cell membranes independent of transporter binding. When it is here, transporters pump methamphetamine into the neurons, then into the brain, specifically the cerebral cortex and the limbic system. So here is a diagram of a nerve terminal where the methamphetamine, which is the little triangles, enters the dopamine or non-ephedrine containing vesicles and causes the release of the neurotransmitter. Methamphetamine also blocks the dopamine transporter from pumping dopamine back into the transmitting neuron. So hence why the methamphetamine keeps passing through to the postsynaptic neuron and goes straight to the brain. Long-term consequences of methamphetamine use. Methamphetamine can affect the structure of the brain because of the high amount of activity in the brain of the microglial cells can cause damage to the healthy neurons. So while all the methamphetamine is traveling through the nerves, it constantly travels and there's so much activity that it can result in damage in the long term. This can also result in the death of additional nerve cells in the brain, therefore the brain structure changes. And over time it impairs visual learning and slows down motor skills due to alteration of the dopamine system, mostly affecting the fine motor skills. It can cause brain damage, in particular to the frontal lobe. And users of methamphetamine display the same deficits as someone with a brain damage, such as inability to change behaviour, so they might not be aware that they're doing something wrong or forget that it's wrong and continue to do it, and an increased risk of relapse if this is the case. There's also an increased risk of stroke and developing Parkinson's disease. It can also cause dependence and addiction, as well as psychological symptoms such as schizophrenia with auditory or visual delusions. Paranoia can cause anxiety, mood disorders, insomnia, and violent behaviours. And in someone that's got a family history of schizophrenia, it can heighten the risk of getting schizophrenia later on in life. So here is a diagram of the neurotoxic effects of methamphetamine, and just in the diagram it shows a normal nerve cell with the axon terminals, axon, cell body and the nucleus. Over time you can see that there's nerve cell with damaged terminals, so the axon terminals are a bit thinner, the cell body's wearing down a bit, and then you've got cell death, which is where the cell has died and it's all broken up. And it shows that it triggers a natural mechanism called apoptosis that promotes the complete disintegration and death of additional nerve cells. So to conclude, methamphetamine, it's been around for several years, originating back to World War II, where it was used to keep the soldiers awake. It went from being sold over the counter due to its highly addictive nature and abusing the drug, and went to underground labs, so typical black market labs. It's commonly used today as a party drug due to the euphoric effects and the high it produces, which is popular amongst partygoers. But however, long-term use carries with it consequences such as brain damage due to the changes in the brain and the high amount of activity that's going on in the brain. And it can cause an onset of mental illness, in particular schizophrenia, higher risk of Parkinson's disease, risk of stroke, and usually a drug-induced psychosis. Hence why it can make methamphetamine users dangerous and more violent. It's a highly addictive drug with long-term consequences, as explained in the presentation. If you're struggling with methamphetamine addiction, there's always help. You can get it by going to see your local GP or to a drug and alcohol addiction centre.